welcome to Arts Express. This is Prairie Miller, and on the show, Pacifica host Garland Nixon demystifies the Epstein scandal and more. And you're probably going to take offense at some of the things I say, which I think is a good thing.
Good evening. My name is Garland Nixon. Anyway, we got plenty to talk about. I guess, I don't know, maybe my show is a little smidgen bit controversial. If you are a member of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, one of those two parties, you're probably going to take offense to some of the things I say, which I think is a good thing, because I'm a member of neither party and I have nothing but disdain for the organized parties in the United States, nothing but contempt for the organized parties. And I say this, if you are a member of the party, I'm the person you need to listen to. You need to listen to people who are outside of that paradigm, people who've had it with both of those parties, people who say, I'm going to look at things a little bit differently. Because if you're a member of an organization or a group, that organization or group has a particular perspective, and you tend to end up caught up in that perspective. And it's very, very good to listen to people outside of your perspective. It's very good to listen to people like I always say, I go to the gym. I go to the gym to make myself uncomfortable. You do not grow when you're comfortable. You grow when you're uncomfortable. If somebody needs, let's say psychotherapy, I always say this, there's only two kinds of people who need therapy and don't get it, and people who don't get it and need it, which is basically the same. Most everybody's got our issues, and we all got our issues and things like that, and we all need therapy. So we all need to make ourselves, you go to therapy and they start asking you, tell me, why are you angry at your mother? And you think about it, no, I didn't realize I was angry at my mother. You know what I'm saying? You're uncomfortable. That's a good thing. Right? Why do you feel like your brothers and sisters always were the chosen child and you felt like you were in the background, the black sheep of the family, dare I say, and you start feeling uncomfortable, things like that, right? That's how you grow. Make yourself uncomfortable and listen to somebody like me. If you're a diehard Democrat or diehard Republican or a Trump supporter or a Trump hater, or whatever it is, listen to somebody every now and then who has a different perspective. It's good for you. And that's why I always say I like for people to call that disagree with me. It makes me a little uncomfortable. Well, not so much anymore, because I like to hear that. That's where I grow. That's the growth zone, right? Is when you deal with people who disagree with you. So let's go. Let's start talking about a couple things here before we get going. We'll start with Epstein. Here's what's interesting about the whole Epstein thing. And that is, in America, really important subjects always get redirected to persons, to individuals. Now, what is the Epstein thing now? What is the big, look online, what is it? Trump was in the Epstein papers. No, Trump wasn't in the Epstein papers. Trump's just trying to stop this because he's in the Epstein papers and he don't want to be outed. Why didn't Trump do this? Why didn't Trump do this? Should Trump do that? Shouldn't Trump do that? Here's what I have to say. Let me give you my perspective on the whole Epstein. From all that we've researched, from all that we've looked at, let's think about this for a second. What is the issue with Epstein and why is it important? Something is very, very clear here. Alex Acosta, who was trying to get into the Trump administration, was questioned. And when questioned, what he was asked was this. Hey, you're in Florida, and old Epstein got caught child rape, child trafficking, all kinds of terrible things. The things that you get life in jail for. And he got a sweetheart deal. And he didn't even like spend any time in jail. He walked nothing. He barely got a slap on the wrist for child sexual trafficking and rape. Can you explain that, Alex Acosta? And Alex Acosta said, I was told that he's intelligence. Leave it alone. Now, what else do we know about Epstein? Epstein started off as a teacher at this highly prestigious school called the Dalton School. And he was hired by a guy who ran it, whose son, Bill Barr, would eventually become the Attorney General under Trump. Bill Barr's father ran the Dalton School, and he hired Epstein at this prestigious school. But there's one thing strange about hiring Epstein. This is a prestigious high school, prestigious, where rich folks go, where you got to have the finest education. And they hired Epstein to teach. He didn't have a college degree. Doesn't that seem a little strange to you? That some prestigious, highfalutin school would hire a guy that didn't have a college degree. And then he became what we've told is a director of people's money, a money exchanger, a money something or other, and he was worth billions of dollars. But here's the problem. Let's say he was worth billions. He spent it like he was worth hundreds of billions. Okay, so you're a billionaire. But can you afford an island? I saw the island. I stood on the shores of St. John's in the Virgin Islands, and a guy pointed and said, "See that island right there?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's Epstein Island." I said, "Holy jumping Jehoshaphat. That's Epstein Island." He said, "Yep." I looked at it. I'm like, okay, wow, that's kind of scary. But do you know how much it would cost to buy an island in the Caribbean? And he had a gigantic ranch compound in New Mexico. And he had the biggest, most expensive townhouse in like the Upper East Side worth like 50, 60 million. He spent money, supposedly he's a billionaire. He spent money like he was a trillionaire. He spent money like a country spends money. And you know, Jamie Dimon, who's in charge of JP Morgan, did you know JP Morgan ended up paying $290 million out to Epstein victims because of their involvement, Jamie Dimon's involvement in Epstein? And that he was laundering money through JP Morgan. Whatever happened to that? Laundering money through JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, $290 million. Nobody was charged. And let me add this about the so-called Epstein list. I wouldn't call it a list. Let me tell you why. Now, say this again, for those who don't know, my background is this stuff. I was an investigator in a police department, but I was the commander of investigations. I taught investigations. I worked with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. Trust me, I know this stuff. So what we actually have, rather than per se a list, is, I believe, my understanding is 200 to 250, 220 various interviews that the FBI did, where they interviewed women. And the women said, "This happened to me. This guy did this." And they named a lot of names of very famous and powerful people. Young girls. "Well, I was 13 and was forced to have sex, or, cajoled into having sex with this rich and powerful man, and we did this and that and this and that," right? So rather than just have a list, they have case after case after case where young girls, often below the age of consent, told our government that they were pushed into having sex with these wealthy, powerful billionaires, leaders of countries, you name it. So here's the question to the FBI. Did you charge any of them? Right? I mean, if you went to the FBI tomorrow and said, "Look, I got to tell you something about Garland." What? "He kidnapped me, he beat me, he raped me, he robbed me, I watched him stab 4 people and kill them, he threw a guy out the window, and he kicked the dog." Well, I'm going to jail for kicking a dog. Yes, Michael, you can get away with killing people. You kick a dog, you're going to jail. But my point is this. If you went to the FBI, you don't think they'd knock on my door? "Hello, Garland. Yes, it's the FBI. We've got allegations that you kicked the dog. We're coming in to talk to you, and we're going to charge you with a crime." Don't you think that would happen? Do you think the FBI would just put those things aside and never, ever bring it up again? And when somebody says, "I'm requesting to see the list of what happened to Garland," do you think they'd say, "Oh, no way, there is no list"? No, they wouldn't. So we ask ourselves, oh, by the way, one other thing about Epstein. Epstein was visited by at least 2, possibly 3, former prime ministers of Israel. Ehud Barak, Ehud Olmert. They came to his house. Prime ministers of Israel came to his house. One might look at that and say, "I think he's an Israeli spy." In fact, I think he's a U.S. and Israeli spy, and MI6 too. So the evidence, if you look at it, is overwhelming. Epstein was not just some bad guy who was having sex with children and having children Diddy-style sex parties. No, it's far worse than that. The government of the United States and the government of Israel, and in all likelihood, at least the government of Britain, were involved in child trafficking for sex. Think about this now. United States government, government of Israel, involved in child trafficking for sex. And now they're covering it up. Now, as I always say, I know if you hate Trump, you're going to be, oh, private Trump's in, blah, blah. If you hate blah, blah, blah. Let me just give you a reality. The arrest, all the stuff that happened with Epstein and the ultimate demise of Epstein happened in 2019, right? Okay. Trump, I'm sure Trump is in it. I'm sure his numbers in it. I'm sure he was doing all kind of unthinkable deeds. So he probably ain't going to let him out. But even if he wasn't in it, he wouldn't be able to release that stuff. Don't fool yourself and think if Trump's name wasn't in it, that he would release it. No, he wouldn't. Here's an example. This happened in 2019, right? Joe Biden came in 2020. Didn't he have the House? Didn't he have the Senate? And didn't they have the White House? It never crossed Joe Biden's mind to release the Epstein victims list, did it? Then the Republicans came in. Why, they could have squeezed Joe Biden when they came in 2022 and 2023 and 2024, 2023, 2024, when they came in and they were in the Congress. Couldn't they have squeezed Joe Biden and said, Biden, release it? But they didn't they? Did they? No, they didn't. Because the Republicans are not going to release the Epstein list. And the Democrats are not going to release the Epstein list. If they release the Epstein list, the American people would say, you mean to tell me that my government is involved in child trafficking, child prostitution, blackmail, graft, corruption? Well, let me say this. You left out assassinations because they're always involved in that. So you can get mad at, you blame it on Trump. Oh, Trump's name is in it. Yeah, of course his name's in it. Anyone who was in power, they thought would be power, they thought had a lot of money, they said, come on over here. We got some young girls for you, or God forbid, in some instances, I'm sure young boys. But whatever the case, they had some people underage for them. Everything was videotaped. And if the person ever stepped out of line, let's say, for instance, there was a genocide going on, and the person were to say, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. I'd like to speak out about the genocide. Well, somebody might then say to them, we got some videotapes of you from 2012 at the Epstein Island, so you might not want to say anything about the genocide, at which point the person would say, what genocide? I don't have any idea what you're talking about. There's no genocide. Hamas, October 7th. That's the way it works, my friend. It's some of the rich and powerful people that won't say anything about this ongoing genocide. You best believe they're compromised. A lot of them are compromised. Some of them aren't. Some of them are just plain evil. But let me put those things together. Let me put those two things together for a second. The government of the United States and Israel were involved in blackmail based on trafficking of children for sex. And now they're involved in genociding children. Traffic them for sex, kill them, raping them. So our government was involved in child rape, child trafficking, and now they're genociding children. I'm just throwing that out there. And I'm going to go somewhere with that. Let me go somewhere with that. As a Black person, if I look at the issue of reparations and I say, well, geez, the Jewish people, a lot of Jewish people, and a lot of Zionists in Israel, different people got reparations for what happened during the Holocaust. And even now, there's some more people going after bank accounts, Swiss bank accounts, based, on what happened in Germany based on what happened in Germany, the Holocaust and stuff. So I look at Japanese people that were interned in camps during World War II, and they got reparations. And I say, well, if all of those people have a right to reparations, surely Black people have a good, strong legal case for reparations, right? It's no, come on. But let me say something to Black folks that's trying to get reparations. Forget it. Throw in the towel, ain't happening. Here's what I mean. Your government is involved in child rape, child sex trafficking, and genocide. If you think you're ever going to get justice, reparations, or anything from these jokers, you are sorely misled. You know what that would be like? Do you ever see Jurassic Park? Where in Jurassic Park, The people were, they're in these little trucks, and next thing you know, a big Tyrannosaurus Rex comes out, and it's biting people and swallowing them, and it's doing all this kind of stuff, right? He's a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and you're looking at this gigantic thing with all these teeth, and it's growling, and it's biting, and it's doing the things that you'd expect a Tyrannosaurus Rex to do if one was in front of you. Can you imagine if one of those poor hapless people who happened to be in the path of that, who was running and hiding and diving under cars and sliding over cliffs, trying to get away from that Tyrannosaurus Rex, this foul, fanged beast. Can you imagine if one of them had looked at the other one and said, I think maybe we can reason with this thing. Let's give it a shot. They would have been eaten instantly. They'd have said, excuse me, Mr. Tyrannosaurus Rex, all this biting people and walking around shaking things and all. I mean, maybe we could live differently than that. Do we really all have to live like that? I understand you got to eat, but, we're just here to go through the park. We brought some kids. What do you think, Mr. Tyrannosaurus Rex? You think they could bargain with a Tyrannosaurus Rex? No, they would be chomped up, eaten, and swallowed instantly, because that's a Tyrannosaurus Rex. It wouldn't be logical to expect a foul-fanged beast that bites people in half and swallows them to suddenly start negotiating to do the right thing, would it? And likewise, would it be logical to expect justice from a government that rapes, traffics, and genocides children? I would think that if somebody asked me, hey, Garland, what do you think the odds are? I'd say, well, what are they doing right now? Well, they're committing genocide, raping children, child trafficking, things like that, assassinations, propaganda, lying to the public, starting wars all over the place. I'd be like, yeah, well, that probably is not going to do real well there. Perhaps we'd have better luck trying to negotiate with a Tyrannosaurus Rex, or next time give it a shot with a velociraptor. Hopefully that'll work. But as far as the U.S. government, they're criminals. It's a criminal government. It's time for Americans to wake up.
And coming up next on Arts Express.
Everything's falling apart. Every week brings me a new humiliation. I don't have anything. You know what a public school teacher makes these days? Desperate times call for desperate measures.
You are about to become a millionaire. The secret is in you. It could be a talent.
It's not like you're some genius in bed.
Or a gift.
You liked what you had the first time, you wanted it again?
You want to be a millionaire? Why don't you go market your...
Want to help me sell myself?
Maybe for like a percentage.
You want to be my pimp?
Yeah.
This is my first day on the job.
Oh, you just keep on using me.
Hey, sugar. Donnie's here.
Until you use me up.
Sugar?
Till you use me up.
And those were scenes from Hung, the controversial classic satirical series starring Thomas Jane as a down-on-his-luck Detroit high school teacher turning to sex work as the strange solution. And Jane is our guest on the show in conversations about all that, and very much in common with Breaking Bad's Bryan Cranston, a teacher turned drug dealer in this economically crisis-ridden country. Jane will discuss all of this and more, including an equally unconventional Western he stars in and produced, and why, Murder at Yellowstone City, in which his post-Civil War preacher, in an allegory about our present time, turns Wild West revolutionary against a corrupt government. First, some scenes from Murder at Yellowstone City, then Thomas Jane.
Gold, which you all came here to find, brings you nothing but destruction and disaster.
I want to get as far away from this place as I can. It is an evil place.
You gotta quiet those hands. Come on. Don't let the violence unsettle you.
This is my town. And these people, good or bad, are my people. What matters is law and order. Let me tell you about justice. Kill a man in this town, everybody knows there's a price to be paid.
Now, what about the truth? You're all murderers.
Preacher!
A necessary end will come when it will come.
Load up! Preacher!
Oh, God.
Drop it! So much for your divine grace.
Hello.
Oh, great. Hello, New York.
Hello, Thomas Jane, and welcome to our show.
Hey, thank you.
And where are you?
I'm outside of downtown in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
Here. Perfect.
Now, what was it about Murder at Yellowstone City and this story that drew you in?
Classic Western. You know, I think people try to mess with the Western and they end up failing. People get bored. But this is just a classic, Western about the outsider who comes into a small town and confronts trouble and stirs things up, and then evil is conquered, and wrongs are righted, and we feel a little more free. I mean, Westerns are about individual freedom versus sort of the rules of the town and morality and ethics and doing the right thing. And in a Western, a good Western, you confront a town, the outsider comes to town, and the town is either basically good but weak, or it's inherently bad but strong. And in our Western, we've got a little bit of a combination. We've got a corrupt sheriff, and then we've got people in the town that do need protection, and aren't getting it from the corruption that's crept into the town. A man is wrongfully accused, and he finds unexpected help in a preacher, played by Thomas Jane, and his wife, Anna Camp, turn out to be worthy, strong enough to be able to unravel the mystery of Yellowstone City.
Now, this director of the film, Richard Gray, is Australian. So what do you feel an outsider's perspective brings to this film and to the Western genre, and a view of America's past, as well as symbolically what's going on in this country today, perhaps?
I think The Outsider has always had a interesting perspective, whether it's America or anywhere else. The classic Western is generally based on an outsider coming in to a town and experiencing that town from the outside, and he's rejected by the town, and he's unwanted usually, and yet he brings something vital to the town to help restore order. So Australia has a lot of parallels with the American West. There's a lot of desert. It's a hard life. People had to carve out a living. So there's a hardiness to the average Australian that is confluent with the hardiness of the pioneers of the American West. So I think that Ritchie and Australia in general finds great parallels in the stories that we tell about the American West. And so Ritchie was actually a very good choice. I produced the film with my company Renegade, which we started in 2019, and we found Richie to be an excellent choice to direct this Western because of those reasons.
Now, at one point, the question is raised about injustice. What about the truth? And Gabriel Byrne, as the sheriff, responds, I'll do whatever I can to see that justice seems to be done. A very telling remark and observation about issues plaguing this country today. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that the idea of truth is being perverted in our country and around the world today. The access that we have through the internet, and it's really an internet phenomenon. Without the internet, we wouldn't have this problem. And the problem is simply that there's a narrative that people in control wish to impose on society. And this is all happening all over the West, Australia, Canada, the UK, America. The reigning narrative is being challenged in a way that has never been challenged before, because we now have access to data that contradicts the reigning narrative. In other words, the sheriff of the town, he can tell any story he wants as long as justice appears to be done. And the definition of justice will also be defined by the sheriff. So that no longer flies. The basic defense against that is to challenge the veracity of the alternate media, and basically, hence we have invented the words misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. These terms were originally applied to mainstream media companies like CNN, NBC, and therewith. And then they, the Washington Post, the Washington Times, all the mainstream folks were getting caught applying their misinformation. And they've been caught numerous times. And the problem, what they did was they flipped it around. They literally took the word and appropriated it and started using it against alternate media sources. So this is historical. You can look this up. This happened, and now they've basically co-opted that narrative and twisted it around 180, and now we have things like the Ministry of Truth that was recently tried to be created in Washington, D.C. They called it something else, but, it's essentially the Ministry of Truth, the arbiter of truth. There is no arbiter of truth. You are the arbiter of truth. You are smart enough, educated enough, and adult enough to decide what is true, and you need to do your homework. I think there's a call for people today to actually look into the issues that you're interested in. You can't have it spoon-fed. Nothing can be spoon-fed anymore. There's too many narratives that are being forced down our throats. So our job as citizens of the town is to do our own research and make up our own mind. And Yellowstone City does have correlations with you're astute to pick it up. It's a entertaining yarn. And we don't get political, but the truths that we're exploring in the movie absolutely apply to what's going on today. And you'll find that a lot of good Westerns, as they evolve over the decades, followed the trajectory of the society that was creating the Western. So we've seen the Western evolve over time because of the people that were telling the story and the times that they lived in. Our Western is no different.
And I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts today, looking back on what you were up to in Hung and its depiction of economic hard times and the ruins of Detroit and desperation back then? And once again today that we see it, and as a result that we see more often on screen in dramas like Hung and Breaking Bad, that continued desperation. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that you're exactly right. I mean, Breaking Bad and my show Hung on HBO were reflections of the time that we made the movies. You know, we just come out of 2008, the crash, which destroyed 2009 and 2010, and people are still recovering when we put the show up. And so those images in the opening of Hung, like a giant wrecking ball tearing down Tiger Stadium in Detroit, were indicative of the not only what was going on in our society, but also the feelings of desperation that people were dealing with. And we had a show that a guy he was a high school teacher, but he got desperate for cash, and he happened to have a large member, so he started renting it out to hungry women as a prostitute, and that had a lot of parallels with sort of what we felt was going on at the time.
And what was the best and the worst part of being part of Hung? And what do you see that series saying about the battle of the sexes today? And how would you compare and contrast being an object of desire in Hung with an object of assassination in many of your movies?
Well, I guess the worst part was whenever I would go out, everybody'd be staring at my crotch, wondering if I really had a giant penis, and that got a little old. I don't. And the best part of it was the actual doing of it. I thought the writing was terrific. And the other bad part was doing a show called Hung. I think that kind of turned people off right from the get-go. People are incredible. We have a funny relationship with sex in this country. Hung is sort of this self-referential, macho thing that I think it's a little too obvious and bold as far as, stating what people, men, value, right? And everybody wants a big dick. So there's something sort of like polarizing about that title. And I was, kind of disappointed that I think it kept people away from the show, or maybe judge the show. But that said, the show it found its audience despite the title. But the real joy of the show was the terrific writing and the great actors and actresses that I got to work with. And everybody, as actors, we love great writing, and so we go to where it is. I mean, I actually turned down the part, wouldn't even read the script just because of the title. It took me a couple of weeks just to open it up, and then I discovered the great writers these folks were, and then Alexander Payne came on and directed the pilot.
Well, it was
we had a great time.
Yeah, it was a great show, and also its focus on Detroit. That was wonderful.
Yeah, Detroit was a great town. Everybody was going to Detroit for a while there. Detroit's a great city. There's a lot of great architecture and great people.
And all the problems they're having there. Yeah. And I read about when you got to Hollywood to pursue acting. You were initially living out of a car and homeless, and often doing street performances to earn money, about which you said, quote, "I had 2 songs in my repertoire that I hammered to death, Hey Joe and Knocking on Heaven's Door, and people used to pelt me with change just to shut me up." How do you feel those years of struggle have influenced you as an actor and the characters you choose to play?
Yeah, they used to pay me to go away. I don't know. I've always felt kind of like an outsider in this business, but that's, just comes from me. I felt like an outsider when I was in high school, just always related to the outsider. I think it makes good drama, a lot of our drama is about outsiders and all that stuff. And I guess I just got a feel for it, And I'm also proud of where I come from and who I was and who I am now. I like having a story that's a little different than everyone else's. By no ulterior design of my own. It's just, that's the way the cookie crumbled, and I'm proud of that. I think it gives an outsider perspective.
And what can you say about the challenge of portraying real people in movies, as when you played Neil Cassidy in The Last Time I Committed Suicide?
Right, and Mickey Mantle in the movie 61.
Yeah.
And then also Andre Stander in the movie Stander, a South African policeman who got so fed up with the corruption around him that he started robbing banks on his lunch hour. True story. Then he got thrown in jail, and then he spent a couple years in jail. His own partner busted him, by the way. And then he broke out of prison with a gang of criminals and went on the biggest crime spree in South African history. His name was Andre Stander. It's also a pretty good movie. It's worth checking out. The responsibility is, of course, to the people that you're playing and their families. A lot of the people that I portrayed were dead by the time I portrayed them. And you've got an obligation to, really my obligation was to the people who knew the man, to Mickey Mantle's sons, to Neil Cassidy's wife, to Andre Stander's friends and family that were in South Africa and remembered the man. That's my point. Your obligation is to the people who know the man, and to honor the truth of who they were. And, whether that truth is palatable or unpalatable, I believe that you can stand on the truth. So you don't have to color a man with, rosy pastel colors if those rosy pastel colors did not make, necessarily have to like those parts of that human being. But hopefully you're representing the good, the bad, and the ugly about these human beings, and giving as best you can an honest portrait of a real human life. There's nothing more sacred.
All right. I have one last question. When Thomas Jane looks in the mirror, what does he see?
Possibility. Possibilities.
Anything else?
That kind of says it all.
Oh, all right. Okay, well, thank you so much, Thomas Jane, for calling into our show.
Thank you. Good questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
This is John Leguizamo, and I want to give a shout out to everybody. Get political. Get your political on. This is John Leguizamo.
Coming up next on the show, Bro on the Global Television Beat, diving into Nautilus, the sci-fi series reimagining Jules Vernes' 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
The corporation's more powerful than any country. We must maintain dominance. That is why the Nautilus was developed.
I can taste freedom, Nemo. It's now or never. This is Nemo. We have taken control of the Nautilus. We'll use it to escape. Start the engine.
This is Brope on the Global Television Beat, Breaking Glass. Today's episode, Nautilus, a seaworthy vessel that Disney tried to sink. Nautilus, a reimagining of Jules Vernes' 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, is a triumph of a series where in this retelling, the villains are the thinly disguised British East India Bay Company, and the heroes are a group of multi-culty misfits escaped from a company prison in 19th century Bombay. It's a rugged road as the designers of this first submarine steal it from the company and then are pursued to the ends of the earth, literally from the South Seas to Antarctica, by a 19th century version of the Dark Star, a company armored vehicle named the Dreadnought, recalling an early naval arms race between England and Germany that led to World War I. It's these kinds of allusions that make the series so powerful, and rather than straying from the Verne original, the series instead returns the anti-imperialist thrust of both 20,000 Leagues and its sequel, The Mysterious Island. Both feature the Nautilus Captain Nemo's actual identity as the Indian Prince Dakar, in both novel and series, out to avenge the death of his wife and daughter, which in the series is just one of the atrocities committed against Nemo and his crew by, in Nemo's time, the largest corporation on Earth and much more powerful than the British government. The crimes of the company are legion and well documented. 2 Indians have watched their village burn. Nemo, while studying in England, returns to find his wife and child slaughtered, and a former company official has set up his own dominion on a South Sea island, instituting what is in effect slavery. The company is also the villain in Taboo with Tom Hardy, and now, as instantly summoning cruel and ruthless behavior, lays a strong claim to be the representational 19th century equivalent of the Hollywood Nazis. The most famous prior version, also by Disney, starred a brooding, downcast James Mason as a conflicted Nemo destroyed by his pursuit of vengeance. One of the many improvements that this current version effects is that slowly Nemo is able to let go of his bloodlust, and this is accomplished by his acknowledgement and devotion to his ragtag crew. These include a British upper-class woman, humility, a budding scientist who wants to escape the masculinist prison of a forced marriage to Mr. Pitt, a company board member who deserves his appellation as he proves himself to be a ruthless representative of the company, whose quest for domination includes both humility and India itself. Also along on the submarine are her French former anarchist maid, Loti, who strikes up a relationship with a Maori sailor, Soyin, a Chinese woman thrown in the Bombay prison, and the 2 Indians, one of which refuses at first to betray his fellows when offered a chance to save his family, because that would involve trusting the word of an Englishman, a prescient admonition that reminds us of the betrayed promises of Trump and the West, whose claim to be negotiating was a pretext to lull Iran into quiescence in order for both Israel and the U.S. to bomb its facilities and kill its commanders and chiefs. The Guardian, whose constituency should be a prime audience for the series, gave it a negative review based on its ill-defined secondary characters. It's these characters who man the sub and flesh out Prince Dakar's claims against the company. They're not well developed until later in the series, but from the moment they tell their stories, they become more than archetypes. The second season, with the company's sideline, was going to be Prince Dakar and this crew taking on the might of the British Navy as the Empire attempts to build a submarine of their own to hasten the pursuit. Alas, this is not to be. Disney Studios spent $300 million on the 10-episode series, and then, rather than release the series on its streaming service, Disney Plus, instead scrapped it as part of its attempt to cut $3 billion from its films and series, choosing to take the tax write-down that would accrue by wiping the series off its books, not to mention the cost of publicity to release the series in the American market. The scrapping, though, was not as bad as Warner Disney, which shelved its $800 million film Batgirl with a black actress playing the lead character. Disney sold the series first in France, then the US and Australia, where it was the biggest budget series ever filmed in that country, and then shipped it off to AMC and its streaming service, AMC Plus, in the US, which last year also became the refuge of Warner's already shot and edited fourth season of Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer, the two series being together two of the most politically aware series in the current landscape. 20,000 leagues ahead of the leading nominees for this year's Emmys, the pretentious Apple Plus's Severance, a work-washing series which in the guise of workplace awareness simply covers up the complaints of that company's employees, and The Penguin, an over-bloated, pun intended, voyage into the despair of Batman's The Dark Knight, while suggesting in a much diluted fashion the earlier HBO series The Sopranos, which set the tone for the streaming onslaught. Streaming was supposed to be a goldmine, but increasingly the vein is running dry because the viewers, largely due to austerity and job layoffs, are not able to guarantee the overinflated profits that shareholders demand. In a time of cutbacks, politically charged series are always FIFO, first in, first out. This is Bro. On the Global Television Beat, Breaking Glass.
And now on Arts Express, the 5-Minute Marxist, broadcasting from the Red Star Cafe over in Red, Iowa, and delving into actor-turned-activist Denzel Washington's clear-headed view of how American propaganda is basically ruining this country.
Something is shifting, and Israel can feel it. The world is watching. And this time, it's not standing with Israel. It's turning slowly, loudly, relentlessly, from Europe to the Middle East, from the UN to the streets. The collapse has already begun, not with bombs, but with isolation. The fall doesn't always start with fire. Sometimes it starts with silence.
This is Peter Wise from the Red Star Cafe in Red, Iowa. This week I'd like to talk about Denzel Washington. Not that he really needs any plugs, more admiration from anybody about his acting. However, I did see a YouTube video that he had produced, among many, after the illegal raid on Iran by the United States and Israel, supposedly destroying their nuclear capabilities, which turned out to be not true anyway. But beside that, he had a really good take on the lies that are spread about Iran. And as a political novice, I guess I would call him, I don't know, maybe just a talking head, I would definitely tune into his videos on YouTube because he has a very clear-headed view of how American propaganda is basically running this country and the run-up to the war in Iran. And, of course, he mentions our relationship to Israel and the fascist state there. I would definitely trust his words over Hollywood liberals like George Clooney and Susan Sarandon, whom I both admire as actors, but I think that Washington really has a very clear and unobscured view of how things work in Washington, and he's definitely worth taking a listen to. Denzel Washington is obviously committed to expressing the truth, or as much truth that can be found these days, more so than comparative Hollywood actors. Washington's movie work suggests his emergence as a straight talker and unaffected by his media fame, unlike some others I have mentioned. In other words, he has done his homework relative to the real issues the world faces. Maybe this shouldn't be a surprise, as his characters in my favorite works of his are realistic truth seekers and truth bearers, from the hard-nosed detective in Devil with the Blue Dress to the survivor of an apocalypse in The Road and the Black Union Army sergeant in Glory, not to mention his roles in August Wilson's terrific plays. I have yet to see any of Washington's entertainment peers who, in my opinion, pose but don't commit when it comes to ripping off the veil of misinformation and propaganda of the West that has blinded people ever since World War II. Particularly, Washington focuses on the American and Israeli lies and deception regarding Russia, China, and Iran, while touching on a myriad of points supporting this argument. They include asynchronous war, Western arrogance, the emergence of agents of change worldwide, racism, imperialism, colonialism, and on and on. The last video on YouTube I watched of his summed up how the Israeli army of 1967 won a great victory, but it's impossible to win any war now militarily. Washington correctly says there are no military solutions now, only diplomatic ones. His words echo the aims of Marx and Engels to demystify capitalist oppression and its brutal sisters, imperialism and colonialism. The year since 1967 has stripped off the veneer of moral superiority of apartheid Israel for the world to see. Washington does this without expressing any political bias, but simply telling the facts, as indigestible as they are to an audience too long in the thrall of Western lies. It's somewhat odd to me, this convergence of actor and commentator in such a seamless manner, and it's welcome. In a way, Washington not only represents the past reality we accepted as authentic, but he has become a hyper-realistic figure a la Baudrillard's theories. The best part of this is that the reality and the hyper-reality are congruent and consistent. In other words, both Washingtons now know what they are doing, and it is perhaps easily as their truths inhabit both realities simultaneously. Now, I do have a caveat for those or two given the ideas above. It might be that Washington's voice is AI generated, but I think Washington would have dealt with this if it weren't his intention. I highly recommend looking up Denzel Washington's political talks on YouTube because they are clear-eyed, no-nonsense talks that are both revelatory and important, not to mention necessary to the worldwide situation we now face. Well, anyway, so thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Is the sheep preaching hate when he says, I'm not going to let the wolf eat me anymore? If the wolf comes in here, next time he comes in here, I'll do whatever I have to do to keep him off my back. Is the sheep violent or is the wolf the violent one? He wasn't teaching hate, he was teaching common sense. You know, somebody's knocking you over the head, stop them. Do whatever you have to do to stop them. You know, the ones that were knocking him over the head were afraid of the fact that he might swing back, so they said, no, he's teaching hate.
And that's all we have time for today on Arts Express, expression in the arts. And if you'd like to express yourself too, you can write to us at theradiogoddess@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Prairie Miller leaving the station.